Hi, I'm Kathryn.
And I'm Theresa.
And we are the co-authors of the book, Pass the Baton, Empowering All Music Students.
Our goal is to share stories of educators who are passing the baton and empowering their music students. We want to help teachers create music lessons that transform students from passive consumers to vibrant creatives.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It's so good to see you. We are excited to be joined today by Rachael Sanguinetti. I stumbled upon Rachael's work online, and it was really exciting because Kathryn and I have interviewed so many phenomenal teachers, a lot of secondary instrumental, elementary general music, band, chorus, orchestra, all the things. But it's wonderful to hear from Rachael, who has a specialty in secondary general music. So we're really happy to have you here. Welcome, Rachael.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So can you tell us a little bit about your background? Tell us about your current teaching role?
For sure. So my current teaching role, I am at Allendale Columbia School in Rochester, New York. This is year 7 for me there, teaching primarily middle school music, general music, and chorus. I'm also a chorus person, but general music definitely holds my heart. So I teach 6th grade foundational music there, and then I teach courses for the 7th and 8th graders, which includes it's fun being at an independent school because I get to teach lots of different things. So right now I'm teaching audio production and modern band, but I've also taught a ukulele class. I taught a voice class. I teach lots of different things. Whatever the kids are interested in, I can usually propose a class and I get to teach it. And like I said, I also teach 6th through 8th grade chorus there as well. I'm also the dean of middle school students at my school, so doing a lot of the social emotional work with my students. I'm also a PhD student at the Eastman School of Music. This is my 2nd year as a PhD student, so teacher by day, PhD student by night. My background, I did my undergrad at Eastman, my master's at Ithaca College while teaching, which was a wonderful experience for me. Ithaca has a summer program, so I got to keep teaching and go to Ithaca for 6 wonderful weeks during the summer for 3 summers and talk about teaching while also being a master's student. So that's was really a wonderful experience for me. And that was kind of the beginning of my interest in student-centered learning was while I was at Ithaca. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
That's awesome. And how neat that you are a teacher and a learner at the same time, right? And you can really model that for your students.
I think it's huge, right? I go to class in the evening and I have these huge, big, wonderful ideas. And then the next day I'm back with my students and I'm like, oh, this is where, the rubber meets the road. And this is what really matters is what we're doing in the classroom with kids. We can go have these big philosophical ideas, but the kids are what it comes down to, right? And what's happening actually in the classroom.
Right. Being able to take one and have it meet the other is really important.
Exactly.
I love that.
Well, I know you had just kind of mentioned student-centered learning. So could you maybe tell us what student-centered learning is to you and kind of where you found that interest in teaching at that?
Yeah. So for me, it's putting my students and my students' interest and their passions at the center of everything that I do every single day. So as I'm creating new courses or thinking about lesson plans, I'm constantly modifying and changing the curriculum based on the kids I have in the room. So I have a general idea of the things I want the kids to come out with, these learning objectives. I want my students to be able to do these things as they move into the world. But the kids are at the center of what that looks like, right? I try to make my classroom a space that is very much a social space, a safe place for my kids, and is centered around their interest that gives them a chance to express the music that they love, right? I'm really into popular music education and bringing as much popular music into the classroom as possible for my students. And so making sure it's a place that kids can have as much choice and autonomy as possible, that the projects I'm designing or the units that I'm designing have the kids at the heart of it, and that it gives them as much space to bring in their own interests into what we're doing in the classroom. And that didn't necessarily come from my own experience as a learner when I was in middle school and high school. I actually never got to take a middle school. I didn't have general music at the secondary level. It stopped for me as a 6th grader. So I never got to experience secondary general as a learner. And then my undergrad work was very traditional, very teacher-centered. This is how we run a classroom and this is the lesson plan and everything like that. It wasn't really till my master's work that I started thinking about popular music in general. How does that take a role in the classroom? And I think I had this need for it. I knew something was missing, right? I knew that I wanted to fit what my students were interested in, and bring their music into the classroom, but I wasn't really sure how. And I was lucky enough. Ithaca was a really wonderful place for me, and the professors there really started talking about, well, what happens if we put students at the center? What happens if we bring popular music in? How do we do this in an inclusive and safe way for our students? How do we give them space while also providing structure? Like, there's just a lot of questions in there. Yeah. And so that was when I really started kind of exploring what that looked like. Actually, I think my modern band class was the first time I ever really started thinking about it. I don't know how familiar you are all with modern band and Little Kids Rock, but that was like the first time I was like, oh, this is what it's like to have your learners leading the way and to bring their music in. And that kind of rocketed me forward. And then I started experimenting. I went back to my classroom in the fall and I was like, what could this look like? And what happens when I ask the kids? And for my students, it was kind of world. They're like, what do you mean you want to know what we want to know? And I'm like, no, I really do. Like, what music do you like? And they're like, oh, I've never been asked. Nobody ever asks me what I want to learn. It's just, they're like, every other teacher just tells us what we have to learn and you ask us. And that's weird. Like, you're not just going to tell me what to do. And so that's been a learning process for them too, right? Like, in the music classroom, this is what it looks like. I'm asked what I want to learn. I have freedom and I have to make choices based on my own interests. So it's been a learning process for all of us, to say the least.
That's so fun to be able to give them that opportunity. And like, I remember the look on their faces when I first said to them, like, well, what should we do here? You tell us, It's like, no, I really want your opinion. And they don't know how to respond. But I mean, have you found that, in time, they are more comfortable with those questions and they are more excited about it?
Oh, for sure. I mean, we set the precedent day one, right? This is what this classroom is going to be like. And after a couple weeks, they start to expect that. They're like, oh, this is what happens when I come into the room. I'm teaching modern band this semester. It's probably one of my favorite things to teach, just giving kids guitar, bass, drums, keyboards, and singing, and they just like create. And it's so organic, and I never really know what's going to happen in a day. But they come in the first day and they're nervous and they think that I'm going to lead the whole thing. And we talk about, this is what this band is going to look like. And it's all about you, and you choose the music and you choose your instrument. And then by the end, the week before we left for break, they just come in and they just do their thing. And they're like, I'm just out of the way. And it's the most wonderful thing to watch. And they know that I'm there when they need help or they need resources or they want to talk through things. But otherwise I get out of their way, and I just get to watch them make music, and it's the best thing ever.
It really is the best thing, right? It's like this buzz in the music room. You just get to take a step back and they just go, they say hi to you, and then they're just go get their thing started. Right. You're like there to just kind of, be there for them. But at the same time, they just take ownership. It's so awesome to see.
Yeah. I mean, I have a kid who day one was like, I don't really want to be here. Like, I just got stuck in this class. And, oh, okay, great. I'm so happy you're here. Like, he sat down at the piano and started just, tinkering, and he pulled out his Chromebook and he looked up a song and he's just kind of doing it. And now he immediately goes in and rushes for the piano. And I can't even give here's kind of what we're going to do today. Nope. He's just playing without me and doesn't need me. And when he does, he yells and I come over and I help him out. But otherwise, he's on his own, and he goes home and practices. His parents call me and say, man, he's at the piano at home. We've never seen this before. And he's just doing things on his own. And he's pretty good. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't teach him that. He learned this on his own. This is all him.
I love that when the music making doesn't stop when they walk out the door, right? Yeah. It just keeps going. And then they, like you said, they're running back in to continue and to show you. I think that to me is one of our big goals, right? Is that the kids are musical, not just when they're inside of our classroom, but also when they see it connecting to their lives.
When parents email me around the holidays and say, hey, my kid has really expressed an interest in guitar or piano, or how do I foster this at home? What do I do? What instrument should I get them? And I'm like, it doesn't even matter if you have the best guitar in the world or the most inexpensive little keyboard. They'll use it. They're going to play, and resources, they know how to find it now, right? We talk about, well, where can we find music online that's free. We don't have to buy books. We don't have to, rely on somebody else. Where can we find music for free? And they just do it, and it's awesome.
That's awesome. So, you've talked a little bit about your modern band. What is it like? What does it look like in the classroom? Whether it's that class or a different class that you're teaching, how would you describe the student-centered learning, in your building?
Yeah, it looks different depending on the class that I teach. So like modern band, I talked a lot about. I think there's always a balance too around, like, some days, if they've never played guitar before, we have to sit and we figure out guitar together. I can't just like throw them out and be like, go figure this out. Like, there has to be some structure or they're just completely lost. So I never want people to think when I'm talking about student-centered instruction that it's just like students wandering aimlessly around a classroom with instruments. Like, there has to be a little bit of structure there just to support that learning. So modern band, we start with guitar, and we all pick up a guitar and we talk about, like, what skills do you already have? What do you already know? How do we support each other in this learning, right? If you've taken 5 years of guitar lessons, I'm not going to make you play the G chord on the first day. Like, that's not helpful to you. How can you support, this person over here who's holding the guitar upside down, right? So like we create that student-centered environment while also all learning the same skills together. And then at some point, they just get to go and do their thing, and we talk about how do we choose music, what music is appropriate for us with our skill level, all those kinds of conversations, so that as those structures are pulled away, they have that ownership. We've built that up in them. It's not just go make music, do something, because they get lost. They're 12, 13-year-old. They get lost. They need a little bit of help sometimes. So that's a similar model to my other classes. So I'm teaching an audio production class right now. We're using Soundtrap, which is my first time ever using Soundtrap. We used BandLab last year. I kind of experimenting with lots of different digital audio workspaces, a little bit of GarageBand, but a lot of, okay, here's an idea. How do you take ownership of this? So we created podcasts back in November, I think. And so the kids had to learn how to use the microphones. They created intro music and outro music, but the podcast itself was about whatever they wanted it to be about. And so they created music that fit with the podcast. So it was fantasy football season. So I had a lot of fantasy football podcasts, which was great. It's great. Whatever you're interested in, this is awesome. But creating music to go with that. Again, providing some structure, learning about what a podcast is. What is podcast intro music? What's its job? Like, why is it there? Outro music, what's music's role in this whole thing? How do we use microphones? How, it has to be quiet when we record, right? How does that work? Why does this stuff matter? So again, creating some structure regardless of the class, so that they have a place to start instead of just saying, go forth and do something. And at least planting some little seeds in their ideas. So like podcast is a really big generic topic. We'll say like, keyboard skills. What could this look like for us? We want to leave here with some keyboard skills. I do that with my sixth graders. Okay, what songs do you want to play? How are we going to learn these keyboard skills? Do you want to learn from your friend? Do you want to learn from, working with me? Do you want to learn from this whole series of videos I have? Like, how does learning look for you? So there's lots of different moving pieces. And I think it's funny when people walk into my classroom and they have like, if they don't know what's going on, they're like, there are children everywhere and they're all like, talking, and it's this cacophony of sound because I've got kids on guitars and kids like everywhere. It's organized chaos, I think, is what my classroom usually look like. Is, there's kids coming to find me. I'm all over the place. It's just a lot of stuff going on at the same time. And I think some people, it's really overwhelming to think about that's what your classroom looks like. But for me, I'm like, this is it. This is what learning looks like. It doesn't look like organized all the time. There's lots of stuff happening. Regardless of the class that I'm teaching.
Yeah. And what I heard was so many benefits to children. So like, I think of your child that walked in, or the student that walked in and was like, yeah, I just have to be here, right? Was kind of the mindset of like, I don't know, I don't really fit in here maybe, but I'm here, right? But then shifted to piano might be my thing and I can play, and now I'm at home doing it, right? Like, and what was the other one that when I heard you talking, how do you want to learn?
Yes.
What an important benefit for kids to know so they can advocate for themselves in another class. Like I do well with YouTube videos where I can rewind and stop and do and move. And like, that's such a powerful learning lesson for kids to know that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think kids necessarily know that answer all the time.
Right.
No, to be asked that is huge. And sometimes they try one method and then I go check on them. And, if they say, I'm going to watch a YouTube video and we go talk and they're checking their email instead, we say, okay, let's have a conversation about this. It's never like, no, you can't do that. It's, hey, like, what's going on? Like, where did you get stuck somewhere? Do you have a question? Like, did you get stuck on a skill and it was too hard and so you just bailed and you're doing something else? Like, what's going on? And how do I support you in that learning? So it's always approaching it with a, hey, like, how do I support you, instead of, no, you can't do that. And then it's the question of, is this the best way for you to learn this right now? Is YouTube something you can focus on, or do we need to go to this other video series? It doesn't have all those other little videos on the side that you could potentially click on because you're somebody who can easily get distracted. Is it easier for you to sit with me for 10 minutes and we'll work on something one-on-one?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to be paired with your friend over here who already has figured out this skill and is really excited to teach it to you, right? It's what works best for your brain, and I tell them, I'm like, all your brains are totally different and you're all different from me and I learn a very different way. And it's like celebrating the ways that we learn versus we all must fit into this little box of following the book or all watching the teacher at the same time. Like, it doesn't have to be that way. And that's really exciting that it doesn't have to be that way.
Well, and you're not even putting them in their own little boxes. Because I would imagine the student who works with you for 10 minutes is still allowed to watch that YouTube video later.
100%.
Right?
They forget within 5 minutes sometimes. Like, it's
so
just out the window.
So it's not even like they're having to pick their box, but they can choose all the boxes if that's what they need. They can work with the friend and then get some help from you, or they can watch a video and then they don't have to just stick with one thing. So you're providing those supports for everybody to use them as they need them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's so many resources available to them and to us. And I tell everybody, like, I'm a huge fan of free. The more free resources I can find, the better. Like, because I'm a teacher. I have a very limited budget. Like, we don't have hundreds of dollars to shell out on everything. Like, the more free things that I can find that I can share with them, the more things they can keep using after they leave, right? That's the other thing we talk about a lot is secondary general. For a lot of students, it's the last time they're in a music class. If they don't continue with chorus, band, orchestra, they're never going to be in a music class again after they leave me. My 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, they have a certain number of music credits they have to get. But once they leave middle school, like, a lot of them are never in class again. But for me, it's what skills can I give you and resources can I give you so that you can keep going and making music as a high schooler, as an adult. You don't need me. You just need do you want to use a free digital audio workspace? Do you have a guitar at home now that you're really excited to just keep fiddling with, right? You're going to go do your thing. And music probably isn't going to be your life, but it needs to be part of your life. And how do I give you those resources so that you can keep doing that without me? Because I'm not always going to be there, right? You're going to graduate from me, and I'll miss you so much, and I'm always here for you. But I'm not always going to be there for all musical learning opportunities. So, what can I give you so you can keep going?
Yeah. Oh, I love it. It's all the things. Yeah. So, you've mentioned a whole lot of benefits. If you had to like wrap it into one, like the one benefit that you have found to just the student-centered approach, what would you? I know that's a hard question.
No, I think it's empowerment for my learners. Like I said, they're going to leave me, but I want them to identify as somebody who has musical skills. So many times they come into my classroom and they say, well, I'm not a musician. And I'm like, well, yeah, you are. You totally are. What are you talking about? I feel like that word musician is sometimes, reserved for, I went to a music conservatory and there were people there who had gotten into the school who still didn't say like, I'm a musician. And it's like, they weren't good enough to be called that. And I call even my 3-year-old piano students on their first day of piano lessons, like, you're still a musician. You made music today. This is amazing. You intentionally made music. This is so cool. And so I tell all of my students in middle school, like, you're a musician and you have musical skills and you're going to go forth in your learning we're going to give you some skills here so you can keep learning. And you're going to make music here and it's going to be awesome. And I'm so excited to do it with you. And just empowering them to continue that music making. And I think if the classroom environment wasn't set up in this student-centered model, it's the music comes from the teacher, and that's the way it is. And I leave music class, I'm not a musician anymore because I'm not with that music teacher. Versus putting the students at the center, it's, well, I'm in charge of my musical learning, and I have the skills to learn things. And I'm a musician, and now I can keep making music. Even though Miss Sanguinetti's not there anymore, I can keep doing this by myself. And I love it when they come back, they're in high school and they come to visit me and they're like, hey, I'm still working on my guitar skills. Like, or I got a ukulele at home and I'm still playing. Like, or, hey, I want to show you this really cool thing that I just learned. One of my kids came in the beginning of the school year and I was like, oh, it's so good to see you. And she's like, this summer I decided I was going to learn guitar, but the other way. She's like, I usually play it this way, but I wanted to learn it lefty just because. So I did. And she's just like showing me all these. I'm like, okay, cool. She was, I YouTubed it. It was great. Awesome. Like, I wasn't there, but you felt empowered to learn something new just because you wanted to. And that was so cool.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give another teacher interested in starting to maybe just have a more student-centered approach in their classroom?
Yeah, I think it's overwhelming when you first start thinking about it. That's what I've heard from giving conference presentations and talking to people about this. You imagine it as kids running wild with musical instruments, and like some people feel like if I don't have teacher at the front of the room leading, then it's going to be a complete disaster. And that's not necessarily the case. It's all about creating a space that you feel safe as the teacher, right? That you can create an environment that feels good to you and that feels good to your students. And I think if you're transitioning from a model where it's more teacher-centered, it's taking little steps, right? If your unit is 6 weeks long and you see your kids twice a week, well, maybe like pick and choose a couple classes in there. Try it out. What happens if I try a more student-centered activity? And then reflecting afterwards, right? I didn't suddenly magically know how to do this. It was trying things out and saying, oh man, that did not work. And that was a total disaster. And that's okay. Nobody got hurt. Like musical learning sort of happened today. And I'm going to do it better next time. And that's awesome. And having that chance to reflect back on your own teaching skills, and then having the students reflect back too. We do a lot of reflections as part of the learning. So whether it's at the end of my modern bands performed before break. And then we did a reflection afterwards. Hey, this was your first chance to work in a band. How did it go? Like, what worked? And one of those questions is, what can I do to support you? What do you need to continue to learn? And for me, that's a huge check-in as I continue to model this environment. It's, well, what am I not giving them that they still need? What am I giving them? What's working as part of this environment, as part of this learning structure? And then for me, it's continuing to read and listen to people who are also doing this and just like trying to absorb as much as possible. When you surround yourself with people who are also trying to do this and trying to do it well, you get fantastic ideas, right? You learn, you're like, oh man, I could totally do that in my classroom. Or, I went to this conference presentation. This person had this one idea for this one song. I can do that. Mm-hmm. Taking those baby steps instead of being like, I'm going to throw everything out. And like, that's super overwhelming. So trying, adding a lesson and adding part of a lesson, and then just absorbing and reading as much as possible, because there are people who are doing this and doing it really, really well. So just surrounding yourself with those people, right?
Yeah. And, I agree with not just changing everything all at once, because not only is it overwhelming for you, it's for the kids too. Right?
Yeah. They're
like, what is this? Right. So the baby steps is really, really important.
Exactly.
I think too, a low risk when you're trying something, and like you said, when asking for feedback with the kids, a low risk for a teacher is asking when something really went well, right? Like I've done that when the kids, I was kind of surprised by how well a lesson went, and when they were lining up, I was like, who can share with me? Like, you guys seem to have so much fun today and you were really together. Like, does anybody want to share, like, what was it about it that you really enjoyed? And I got so much feedback just getting them to get in line. I mean, I have the littles, but they were just getting in line and I just asked for feedback on something good that happened, but I learned through that positive experience. So there is so much power of when you ask them. You just stop for 30 seconds to ask them for some feedback.
And they come up with things that you didn't necessarily notice, right?
Totally.
You have your own impressions of how the lesson went and how the classroom ran that day. And they come up with things you're like, wow, I totally missed that. Like, I didn't realize that was your first time trying this out, or you learned something new today and I didn't notice, but that's amazing. And like, can we celebrate that together? Celebrating those wins for the kids as well as for you as a teacher, right? And hearing their feedback and knowing what they feel good about is super helpful as you're moving forward and trying new things. Because you're right, it is scary, and sometimes you need that positive, like, oh, this is working. This is working for my kids. I'm not just creating things I think it's a good idea. Like, this works for my kids. So you're right, like getting them 30 seconds. Like, give me a quick something you're proud of today, or something you think went well today, and just continuing to boost their spirits too.
Oh, I love it. So if people wanted to learn more from you, because as you mentioned, surrounding yourself by these good people definitely helps. How could they get in contact with you? How could they learn more about your work and all of that?
For sure. So I have a website, RachelSanguinetti.com. So I have a blog there. Feel free to like send me messages. I tell people, I was like, this is my passion. This is my life, is like teaching and trying new things. And as a PhD student, it's also my research brain. Like, my whole brain is really dedicated to all of this. So people should never feel like they're bothering me or they're having stupid questions. Like, I'm happy to talk to anybody about this stuff, especially if you're really trying to think about secondary general music. I could talk for hours about this. So truly reach out. Like, I'm happy to talk to people. So RachelSanguinetti.com. I also have an Instagram where I post really awesome pictures of my students, because they're amazing and I want to feature them and everything they're doing. So that's Instagram. It's at Miss Sang Teaches Music, but there's also a link to it on my website. So Those are the easiest ways to find me. But yeah, reach out, and happy to talk to anybody at any time about any of this stuff.
Oh, good. Well, we'll be sure to put the links to both of those in the notes as well. And I'll probably link the article that I originally read that on the NAFME blog as well, if that's okay.
For sure. Go for it.
Very good. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. We really appreciate it. And
awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing more of your work in the future.
Yeah,
definitely. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode.
we'd also love for you to consider sharing this podcast with a friend and leaving a positive review. That's one of the best ways to get this message to new listeners.